Rain battered the tin roof at the bus shelter, soaking through the canvas of James Mercer's only duffel bag. 18 hours ago, there had been a meager birthday cake. 12 hours ago, there had been a screaming match. 4 hours ago, his stepfather, Lucas Bennett, had thrown James's clothes onto the wet driveway, changed the locks, and told him his free ride was over. James sat shivering, clutching a crumpled envelope his mother had hidden in the lining of his winter coat before she died of pancreatic cancer 3 years prior. She had told him in a whisper barely audible over the hum of hospital machinery to open it only when he had absolutely nowhere else to turn. Being dumped on the streets of Philadelphia with $14 to his name seemed to meet the criteria. Inside the envelope was a brass key, heavy and tarnished green with age, and a single sheet of lined notebook paper. The handwriting was erratic, a sharp contrast to his mother's usually perfect cursive. 1140 Willow Creek Road, Ole Valley. Ask for no one, trust no one, trust no one. It belongs to you. It took 3 days of hitchhiking and walking along unlit highway shoulders to reach the coordinates. What James found at the end of a mile-long dirt driveway wasn't a sanctuary. It was a rotting carcass of a property. A dilapidated farmhouse sat sinking into the Pennsylvania mud, its roof sagging like a broken spine. The surrounding fields were choked with aggressive briar patches and dead weeds. A faded wooden sign hung by one rusty nail near the porch, Oak and Iron Farm. Exhausted, hungry, and fighting a creeping sense of total despair, James used a heavy rock to smash a pane of glass on the back door. The brass key didn't even fit the modern deadbolt someone had installed years later. He crawled inside, the air thick with the smell of mildew and animal droppings, curled up on a moth-eaten rug in the parlor, and cried himself to sleep. He was 18, completely alone, and his grand inheritance was a condemned building. Sunlight pierced through the cracked window boards the next morning, waking him with a harsh glare. James sat up, his joints aching. The house was dead quiet. Driven by a desperate need to find anything he could pawn for a hot meal, he began to tear the house apart. The living room held nothing but shattered furniture. The kitchen cupboards were stripped bare, but in the master bedroom, buried under a collapsed section of drywall, James noticed a strange anomaly in the floor. The oak planks ran vertically, but one small section under the window ran horizontally. He pried the wood up with a rusted screwdriver he found in the kitchen. Beneath the false floorboard sat a heavy fireproof lockbox. The padlock was thick, but the brass key from his mother's envelope slid in perfectly. It turned with a satisfying, heavy click. Inside, James found a stack of leather-bound journals, a manila folder thick with legal documents, and a small velvet pouch containing a gold pocket watch. He opened the first journal. The handwriting belonged to a man named Jonathan Harding. James didn't recognize the name, but as he flipped through the pages, a black and white Polaroid fell into his lap. It was a picture of a younger, vibrant Sarah, his mother, dolphing in the arms of a tall man with sharp jawlines and dark, messy hair. James stared at the man's face. It was like looking into a mirror. It was his own face, aged up by a decade. Jonathan Harding was his biological father. For hours, James sat on the dusty floor, devouring the journals. Jonathan hadn't been just a farmer. He had been the heir to the Harding industrial fortune in Chicago, a man who walked away from the cutthroat corporate world to live simply in Pennsylvania with the woman he loved. But a man with that much money can never truly walk away. The journals detailed Jonathan's growing paranoia. He wrote about his wealth manager, a man he had trusted like a brother, who was quietly siphoning funds, forging signatures, and legally isolating Jonathan from his own trust. October 12, 2007, the entry read, "He has frozen the accounts. He's threatening to tie Sarah up in litigation for the rest of her life if I fight him. I have hidden the real assets where he will never think to look. He thinks I'm broken. Tomorrow, I will make sure Sarah and the boy disappear for their own safety. I will deal with Lucas myself." James's blood ran cold. Lucas Bennett, his stepfather. The pieces slammed together with sickening clarity. Jonathan hadn't died in a tragic hunting accident, as Lucas had always told James. Lucas had orchestrated Jonathan's financial ruin, eliminated him, and then swooped in to rescue a grieving Sarah, marrying her to ensure he maintained control over the remnants of the Harding estate. Lucas had raised his victim's son, waiting out the clock until James turned 18 so he could legally discard him without raising the suspicions of Child Protective Services. James's hands shook as he opened the manila folder. It contained original birth certificates, undoctored bank statements from 2007 showing Lucas's wire transfers to offshore accounts, and a map of the farm. At the bottom of the map, circled in red ink, was the old grain silo behind the barn. Beside it was written, "The roots run deep." Adrenaline banished James's hunger. He bolted out the back door, sprinting through the overgrown thistle toward the towering rusted aluminum silo. The structure looked ready to collapse. The heavy steel door at the base was welded shut. James frantically searched the perimeter, comparing the area to the hand-drawn map. The map didn't point to the silo itself, but to the old stone pump house 10 yards away. James tore the rotting wooden door off the pump house. Inside, under a pile of filthy canvas tarps, was a heavy steel trapdoor set into the concrete floor. He hauled it open, coughing as a cloud of stagnant, dry air rushed up from the darkness. A metal ladder descended into the black. Using the flashlight on his dying cell phone, James climbed down. He expected a root cellar. He expected boxes of old family heirlooms. He did not expect a subterranean bunker the size of a gymnasium. James's phone beam swept across the darkness, catching the reflection of polished chrome. He fumbled along the concrete wall until his hand brushed a heavy industrial breaker switch. He threw it. Fluorescent lights flickered, buzzed, and violently hummed to life, illuminating the cavernous space. James stopped breathing. Parked in perfect, meticulously climate-controlled rows were 5 immaculate vintage automobiles. A 1955 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing, a 1962 Ferrari 250 GT, a pair of 1938 Bugatti Type 57s, and a 1969 Shelby Mustang. Jonathan Harding hadn't left his fortune in banks for Lucas to steal. He had liquidated the untraceable half of his trust and bought rolling, mechanical art, hiding it beneath the earth. Against the far wall sat a massive Mosler safe. The combination was written in the margins of the map. James spun the dial, his sweaty fingers slipping on the metal. 34, 12, 88. The heavy bolts retracted. Inside the safe were stacks of gold Krugerrands, tightly bound stacks of $100 bills wrapped in plastic, and a final letter addressed simply, "To my son, James." James didn't get the chance to read it. The crunch of heavy tires on the gravel driveway above shattered the silence. James scrambled up the ladder, peeking through the slats of the pump house. A sleek black Range Rover had parked near the ruined porch of the farmhouse. Out stepped Lucas Bennett, wearing a tailored Italian suit that looked absurd against the backdrop of the dying farm. He was accompanied by a large, thick-necked man. James recognized as Carl, a private security contractor Lucas frequently employed. "Check the house." Lucas's voice carried over the quiet property, sharp and irritated. The whittle rat took the envelope. "I know Sarah hid it. If he found the journals, we have a massive problem." Panic seized James. He was 18, malnourished, and alone. If they found him down here with the evidence of Lucas's crimes and millions in hidden assets, James would simply disappear. Another tragic accident. He had to think. The bunker only had one exit. If he stayed down there, he was trapped. James grabbed the manila folder full of evidence, shoved it into the back of his jeans, and pulled his shirt over it. He left the trapdoor open and slipped out of the pump house, crawling on his belly through the tall, dead grass toward the perimeter of the barn. "Boss, window's broken back here," Carl shouted from the house. "Find him," Lucas barked, pulling a compact black handgun from a shoulder holster. The sight of the weapon made James' stomach heave. This wasn't just corporate fraud anymore. It was survival. James scrambled up the side of the tractor shed, hauling himself onto the low tin roof. He watched as Carl stomped out of the house, his eyes scanning the overgrown yard. Carl's gaze locked onto the open door of the pump house. "Out here! Something's open!" Carl yelled. Lucas jogged over, peering down into the dark hole. Even from 50 feet away, James could see the color drain from Lucas's face as the bunker lights illuminated the fortune he had spent almost 2 decades searching for. Greed is a paralyzing drug. Lucas didn't even look around for James. He practically shoved Carl aside, scrambling down the ladder into the bunker. Carl followed, his heavy boots clanking on the metal rungs. This was James's only chance. He dropped from the shed roof, hitting the dirt hard, and sprinted silently toward the pump house. Every nerve in his body screamed, expecting a gunshot. He reached the heavy steel trapdoor, just as Lucas's muffled, echoing voice floated up from the cavern. My God, it's all here. The cars, the gold. That bastard hid it all. James grabbed the rusted handle of the trapdoor. With a violent heave, he slammed the heavy steel plate shut. The metallic boom echoed across the valley. Before the men below could even react, James grabbed a heavy steel crowbar resting against the pump house wall and jammed it through the padlock brackets of the trapdoor, securing it tightly. Instantly, the muffled sound of pounding echoed from beneath the steel, followed by Lucas's muffled, enraged screaming. James didn't wait. He ran to Lucas's idling Range Rover, threw open the door, and grabbed the keys from the ignition. He found Lucas's expensive smartphone sitting in the cup holder. He dialed 911, his hand shaking so violently he nearly dropped it. 911, what is your emergency? A comm operator asked. My name is James Mercer, he gasped, staring back at the pump house where the muffled banging continued. I need the state police at 1140 Willow Creek Road. I have a man named Lucas Bennett locked in a bunker. He's armed. I have documentary evidence of embezzlement, wire fraud, and the murder of Jonathan Harding. It took 20 minutes for the sirens to wail in the distance. During that time, James sat on the hood of the Range Rover, the manila folder clutched to his chest, listening to the frantic, muted rage of the man who had ruined his life. When the police arrived, led by a seasoned investigator named Detective Thomas Kessler, they were skeptical of the dirty, shivering teenager. But the moment James handed over the financial documents, the skepticism vanished. They drew their weapons and opened the trapdoor. Lucas and Carl emerged, covered in sweat and dust, screaming about trespassing and theft. He's a thief, Lucas spat, pointing a trembling finger at James. Arrest him. This is my property. Detective Kessler glanced at the property deed James had pulled from the folder. Actually, Mr. Bennett, according to this original deed and the attached trust documents, this property belongs to James Harding. You, however, are under arrest. The look of absolute shattering defeat on Lucas's face as the cuffs clicked around his wrists was something James would remember for the rest of his life. The legal battle took 8 months. Lucas, high-priced lawyers, fought viciously, but the paper trail Jonathan had meticulously gathered in 2007 was bulletproof. Lucas' offshore accounts were seized, his reputation destroyed, and he was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for racketeering, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. James did not sell the farm. 4 years later, at the age of 22, James stood on the wraparound porch of the fully restored oak and iron farmhouse. The sagging roof was gone, replaced by strong dark slate. The fields were cleared and planted, glowing amber in the late afternoon sun. He took a sip of black coffee, listening to the distant hum of a tractor. Down by the barn, the 1960 Ferrari sat gleaming in the driveway, a testament to a father he never met, but who had saved him anyway. James pulled a gold pocket watch from his denim jacket. He popped the latch, looking at the inscription engraved on the inside cover. For my son, may you build what they tried to break. James smiled, snapped the watch shut, and walked out into the fields. He had started with nothing, thrown away like garbage on a rainy street. But he hadn't just found a fortune hidden beneath the dirt, he had found his name, his blood, and the roots to finally grow.